Today on Stock Charts in Focus, we are taking a look at a couple of my favorite tools around the site for identifying support levels out there on your charts. Now, with everything happening in the markets, the big sell-off that we've been seeing lately, a lot of rotation, a lot of charts falling to the downside searching for support, this seems like a great time to highlight some of these tools that can help you pinpoint, track, and analyze support levels on your charts. We're going to do this across different stocks, different ETFs. No matter what we're looking at, indexes, it all applies. So lots to show you on today's show. Of course, you know what it is. It's all new. It's all here. It's Stock Charts in Focus. All right, my friends, welcome to the show, Stock Charts in Focus. Of course, our product focus show here on the channel, where we dig into the site, dive into the features, show you around different corners of the platform, and ultimately help you get more value out of Stock Charts. That's our mission here every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, in a couple of different places up on the main channel, also up on our YouTube channel, and the on-demand platform at StockChartsTV.com. Lots of ways to watch. My name is Grayson Roze, Vice President of Operations here at StockCharts.com, and today's episode is going to be a good one as we do something a little more timely. You know, a lot of times on this show, we're covering concepts, ideas, tools, and features that you can use across any market, any condition, no matter what's happening out there. These are just tools that you should be aware of. Today, we're doing something a little more timely. We're taking a look at some of my favorite support tools. Now, of course, with everything happening in the markets, the big sell-off that we have been seeing, we have a lot of rotation going on. This is a fantastic, fascinating time to be following the markets through price action. And specifically, you know, in areas like tech and consumer discretionary, we have a lot of stocks that have been falling quickly, really kind of searching for support. Now, we have a lot of other stocks that things have been rotating into that are doing the opposite. They're looking for resistance levels that we might hit and bounce off of back to the downside. So there's just a ton going on. But specifically, when we think about the charts out there that are searching for support levels, not just individual stocks, but also ETFs and especially some of the major indexes like the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. We got lots of important charts out there to be watching that are really searching for those support levels. So on today's show, we're going to highlight 5 tools that I personally love to use around the site, really geared towards identifying support levels, tracking those, even annotating them on your charts, as you're going to see. Now, it's going to be fun. We're going to do this in SharpCharts. We're also going to do this in ACP. We're going to sort of compare and contrast the two platforms a little bit, as we like to do on this show. You're going to get to see how these different tools work in both platforms. What's interesting, our 5th and final tool that we're going to highlight today is actually one that's rolled out relatively recently in ACP. Not yet available in SharpCharts, something that we are hoping to bring out here at some point, but we're actually going to jump over to ACP for our 5th and final tool and show you a very special one that we've added to the platform over there. So a little bit of compare and contrast, highlighting one feature that's sort of an ACP exclusive at the moment. But we got a lot to cover on today's show. So let's jump into our 5 favorite support tools for tracking those support levels on your charts. Here we go. All right, my friends. So the way that our show is going to work today, we're going to start in SharpCharts. We're going to highlight a bunch of great tools over in the sort of the legacy tool. As you can see, we're starting with a pretty stripped out chart here of Apple, the all important big mega cap name. Just reported earnings too, so an interesting chart to be watching at the moment. But there is some clear support and resistance levels on this chart, so it's a great one to work with today, actually. But we're starting with a stripped out chart here, just the candlesticks on this one. We're going to run through a couple of these support tools here in SharpCharts, and then after we're done with that, we'll jump over to ACP and we'll take a look at these same tools over in our new advanced charting platform, plus that 5th and final sort of ACP exclusive. So lots to cover on the show today. Now, first up is a tool that I typically have on for my charts, but it's actually just a quick setting. It's really kind of the easiest one to add to your charts. What's interesting about this is it's toggleable. You can turn it on and off in just a single click. So, as some of you might know, we are talking about the inspector. which is this little checkbox up here at the top of the SharpCharts workbench. So as you can see, when I am hovering over this chart here of Apple right now, when I have the inspector turned off, when this checkbox is not checked, you can see that there's really nothing to my cursor. I've just got the little sort of plus icon, which gives me a sense of, kind of where I'm hovering, but there's really nothing going on there. It's just a basic cursor. When we turn on the inspector, what we get is a horizontal and a vertical line that help us identify support levels and also help us track dates on our charts as we're going along. So all we've got to do to turn on the inspector is give that checkbox a click. Now you can see things flashed briefly as the inspector turned on in the background there. But now as I hover over my charts, you can see that things look a little bit different. We have our horizontal line, we have our vertical line. Those do a couple of things for us. We also have, of course, our little info box, which gives us more information about the specific bar that we are hovering over. So this is a great tool. Again, something I actually like to leave on for my charts most of the time. Again, really easy to turn on and off. But when we're specifically thinking about support and resistance levels, this is exactly why I like to keep the inspector turned on pretty much at all times. The fact that this has a horizontal line going right across your charts makes it easy to sort of identify these support and resistance levels as you're going, just sort of on the fly without having to add new indicators or new annotations or anything like that. If you've got a chart pulled up and you're just trying to simply visualize those support and resistance levels across your chart, the inspector is a great way to do that. So as you can see right here, we're going to take a look at this sort of prior resistance turned into support level here for Apple. And we've turned on the inspector and we can see now we just got that horizontal line hovering across. We can position that exactly where we want. And we can see looking back at this chart that Apple really has found some support there around kind of the 136, 137 range. That was an area that we tested back here in, as we can see there at the bottom of the chart, September of 2020. We tested that again in December of 2020. We put in kind of a false breakout above that level, but then pulled back to it, tested it again in February of 2021, and then again chopped around that level in kind of April of 2021. When we finally made a breakout above that level here in July of 2021, we made a nice run to the upside, pulled back for a retest of that level, didn't hit it exactly, but pulled back very, very close to that 136 level in about October of 2021. And it's been another run to the upside here for Apple since then. So the inspector makes it really easy to see this, really easy to kind of start to visualize these support and resistance levels on your chart, just kind of on the fly. There are, by the way, a couple of nice features built into this. If you actually click and drag in any direction, as you can see there on the left side of the chart, the inspector will go into sort of a different mode and actually tell you what the percentage move up or down has been. So we can see that actually since crossing above that sort of prior resistance turn support level, Apple actually made a run of about 34% there to the upside before pulling back, as we've seen recently. This goes the other way as well. So you can actually drag the inspector down and you can see there we chopped around in kind of a 15% range on Apple there as we were going sideways trying to make that breakout above the 136 level. So some great features built in the inspector. Again, this is something I like to leave on when I'm using SharpCharts. But if you ever do want to turn it off, it's very, very easy to do that simply by checking that little checkbox. So as we can see, we can keep using this. We can see that after it made that breakout, Apple put in kind of an interim high in September of 21. Again, chopped around that when it finally made the breakout, tested it again recently, and now we're bouncing higher off that level. So the inspector makes it really easy to see these kinds of things right there on your charts, sort of on the fly. Now, next up, our second tool that we're going to highlight is actually an annotation. So we're going to come down here on the SharpCharts workbench. We're going to look for our annotate button. When we give that a click, that launches our annotation tool, Chart Notes. So this allows us to actually start drawing some of these lines on our charts. We can actually save these annotations to a chart list as well. If we wanted to actually save them to a watch list, save them to a portfolio list, anything that you want to do. If you've got indexes, maybe you're looking at the S&P 500, you want to keep those annotations on your chart of the S&P 500, watch it kind of evolve over time. All your annotations can be saved as a StockCharts member. So what we're going to highlight today, 2 different annotation tools. Now there are a ton in here, but we're going to highlight 2 of our specific line tools that I personally like to use as support and resistance tracking tools. The first one is our Trendline tool. Now, some of you might be saying trend lines, those go up and to the right or down into the right. Those aren't horizontal support and resistance tools. Well, there's a little trick built into chart notes, also built into our annotation tool in ACP, that allows you to actually set your trend lines horizontally or vertically. When you come down here actually to the little question mark, you can give that a click. And as you can see, this little pop-up shows up on the screen, which shows you some of the hotkeys. Now, there are tons and tons of hotkeys you can explore here, but we have some that are specific to different annotation tools. There's some that are global, as you can see up at the top, but there's some other ones that are annotation specific. So in the case of trend lines, as you can see here, if you hold down the command key and then drag, that'll actually snap your trend line either to a 90-degree vertical or a 90-degree horizontal. It'll sort of snap it into either perfectly horizontal or perfectly vertical, whichever one you're kind of closer to. So I use this a ton to draw support and resistance levels on my charts, especially for instance, the things that I own, the charts that I'm kind of watching evolve over time. I want to keep those annotations going. And as you're going to see, we're going to highlight another tool that makes this really easy. But I personally like to use the Trendline tool and pin that sort of to these horizontals to track support levels on my charts. So let's see how that works in practice. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to select the Trendline tool, and I'm going to start drawing this trend line across the screen. Now you can see I'm not actually holding anything down. I've got the mouse held down, but in my other hand, I'm not holding anything down. So this is just a standard trend line. We set our first point, we set our second point, and that's at an angle. If I hold down the command key though, this is actually going to snap now to be perfectly horizontal. So this allows me to draw a perfectly horizontal line across the chart. And because it's a trend line, I can actually set how far this goes. So in this case, I might not want to draw this line all the way across the chart. I only want to draw it across part of the chart. So here, what we can do is draw that trend line, make it perfectly horizontal. We can bring that down a little bit. And now that same kind of 136-ish level that we were looking at on Apple, we've got that drawn across our charts perfectly horizontal there. And once we made that break above it, or sort of took the retest of it, hit the retest of it, and bounced higher, I might want to stop drawing that trend line instead of having it go all the way across the chart. So in this point, we've just drawn basically a ray, but it's perfectly horizontal, and it's a great way to track a resistance level or a support level that you have in mind on a chart. And we can do this again. For instance, we might want to draw that other level that we were looking at there. We'll draw that across a little further. Drag that up and down once we draw it. Now we can set it. And so we can start to draw in these support and resistance levels on our charts. And again, because we've got that little hotkey shortcut, it just snaps it to be perfectly horizontal. Now, just to show you the way this works, if you did want to draw a vertical line, if you're closer to vertical, that'll actually snap it to be a vertical line, as you can see there. But in our case, we're talking about support and resistance levels, so we want to snap those to be horizontal. So this is a really nice way to draw these support and resistance levels across your charts using that Trendline tool and using that little global hotkey that you've got there. Now the other one though, we're actually going to clear out this chart. Those trend lines, when you draw those across your charts, those are just colored lines, and you can make them solid, you can make them dashed, dotted, whatever you want to do. You can add arrows to them, make them thin, make them thick, anything that you want to do, you can do with those trend lines, just like a standard trend line that you're going to draw, for an uptrend or a downtrend. We have another tool though that is specific to support and resistance levels. That is aptly named our auto support and resistance tool. So in that same menu, you're going to open that up, and down here below some of those initial trend line, vertical line, and horizontal tools, you have an entry for auto support and resistance. So this makes it very, very easy to draw these support and resistance levels on your charts without having to actually sort of set the specific level and make sure that you're holding down the key to get it to be perfectly horizontal. And it has one added benefit, which is that the auto support and resistance level will be colored different colors, either red or green, depending on whether price is above or below that line. So let's take a look at how this works. I've selected that auto support and resistance tool. We're going to come down here on our chart to that first level that we were looking at, and I'm going to just click, and now I'm going to drag this line up and down. So we're going to set that around that 136 level. And as you can see, this line is red up until that point where we had sort of the false breakout. Then the line, if you actually zoom in there, it turns green. When we got back below that level, the line turns red again, and then when we crossed above it, the auto support and resistance line turns green again. So the coloring of this line makes it really easy to see whether price is above or below that level. And especially when we end up in a zone like this, where we've got price kind of chopping around a specific level that we've drawn on our charts, the auto support and resistance tool makes it really easy to see where we're actually trading relative to that line. Very, very nice to have this, especially for those major support and resistance points. So sometimes what I'll actually do is combine this tool with that Trendline tool that we were looking at before. Here we've got sort of our primary support and resistance level, the one that is a little bit heavier. We've traded against this level quite a bit here in Apple. So that might be one that we want to sort of bookmark on our charts, if you will, as a very, very important support and resistance level. But we might want to add that secondary line, and instead of having a whole bunch of these support and resistance lines that are all the way across the charts, red and green, we might want to have a secondary line that's just sort of that ray that we were looking at before. So here's the way that a lot of my charts actually end up looking. I'll put that auto support and resistance line all the way across the charts at sort of the primary support and resistance level that I'm watching. And then for some of those next levels that I'm starting to watch, starting to keep an eye on, I'll actually use the Trendline tool, draw that across horizontally, and sort of combine these two tools to track different support and resistance levels that I am watching. So as you can see, these two tools make it very, very easy to draw these support and resistance levels that are important to you, the levels that you are identifying. You can draw these across your charts and actually save them. Again, these get saved to your account. You can save them into a chart list. So whether you're watching an index, maybe you're watching a stock that you own, maybe you're watching an ETF that's on your watch list, anything that you are keeping a close eye on, you can add these annotations, save those right to your account, and watch them evolve over time. Now, the interesting thing about these two tools, the auto support and resistance level is an infinite line. That'll go all the way across. So if you change the time frame of this chart, right now, for instance, we're looking at an 18-month chart, but if we made this a 5-year chart, that auto support and resistance level is going to be drawn all the way across. It's an infinite line. This Trendline tool is just between 2 points. So it is something you can sort of watch evolve over time, or you can start to continue that forward as time goes on. You can keep dragging that line across, sort of expanding it. So two kind of different styles there between the infinite and the ray, basically. As you're going to see in ACP, we've got actually a couple other tools in our new advanced charting platform that help you do these differently. So we'll show that in just a couple of minutes when we jump over to ACP. But hopefully this gives you a sense of how these two different tools work, how they can help you identify those support and resistance levels. So we're going to close out of this chart. We're going to get back to our clean Apple chart, and we're going to highlight our fourth support and resistance tool. Here we are back to basics. We're back to our candlesticks only chart here of Apple. We're going to use an indicator this time as our fourth support and resistance tracking tool. So we're going to come down actually to the overlays section of the SharpCharts workbench. I'm going to open this up, and the one that we're going to discuss today is our volume by price tool. Now, the volume by price tool is a fantastic overlay that you can add to your charts, either in SharpCharts or in ACP. Some of you might be familiar with this, but if you are not familiar with this, what it does, it displays volume traded for anything that you are charting at different price levels. So at each of these different price levels here that we've looked at for the last, that we've traded against for the last 18 months here in Apple, we're going to display the volume for those price levels. But instead of displaying it kind of from the bottom up, we're going to display the volume that's been traded at that price level horizontally from the left out to the right. So what this means here, for instance, in this price range from 124 down to about 120, 115 maybe, between those two price levels, this is the volume that's been traded for Apple. Between these two price levels, between 130 and 124, this is the volume that's been traded for Apple. So what this allows you to do is identify basically big volume price levels in a security that you're watching. As you can see, when Apple was trading around these levels here between about 145 and 135, when Apple was trading between those two price levels, we didn't have a ton of volume. There wasn't a ton of trading volume, trading activity between those two different price levels. When Apple was trading here, when it actually found some support there between about 120 and 125, Apple was trading a ton of volume. We saw a big volume spike here. This was the sort of the most traded volume in the last 18 months between those two price levels there for Apple. So what this can help us do is identify price levels that we might see big volume return to a specific stock. That basically means that there's more of a debate between buyers and sellers in the marketplace at these specific price levels. So we can see that here, this actually might be a little bit of a weaker price level because we just didn't see the volume come into the stock around those kind of 140s range. Down here, though, in the 120s, we've seen a ton of volume come into Apple in the past. We've seen this stock trade a lot of volume at that level. So we might expect to actually see a little bit more support in this name, considering that it's found some support in that range in the past, and it's traded big volume in that range in the past. We might actually see more support from Apple in a price range like that than a price range like this up here in the 140s. Now, there are a couple things that we can do with this indicator. Right now, we're looking at it in kind of just this little bit monochromatic view. All of these price bars, all these volume bars are blue. We can come down here on the SharpCharts workbench, though, and check color volume. When we hit update there, now we're actually going to see these volume bars colored depending on sort of the buying volume and the selling volume. So if it was an up day, if it was a down day, trading in that price range. So this can help us gauge, again, whether this price level is an area where we saw a lot of sellers come in or an area where we saw a lot of buyers come in. If it's an area that we're identifying as support and we've seen a lot of buyers come in for the stock or the index or the ETF at that level, we might expect that support level to hold and to be a little bit stronger than others where we've seen kind of weak buying pressure or strong selling pressure. So this volume by price tool is one that I love to use. I've actually got chart styles saved for it that basically just brings up this view, makes it really easy to click over to a volume view and kind of view this in just a couple of clicks. The nice thing about this too is that we can switch this over to be, for instance, a weekly chart, and we can maybe make this 5 years. Now we can look at sort of a longer term view and see where some of those big volume price levels have been. Now this does have a bit of a bias towards the bottom of the chart because for uptrends, typically we're going to see more volume at the bottom where we've just been trading for longer. We're going to see less volume at the top. The opposite goes for stocks that have been in a downtrend for a long time. But this tool can still really help you identify important price levels where we're going to see volume pickup. And when you combine that with kind of your support and resistance analysis, bringing volume into the picture a little bit, tracking where we've seen buyers and sellers come into the market in the past, this can be really, really important. One ETF actually that comes to mind, I was looking at this the other day, is biotech. So if we pull up XBI, we can see that biotech actually, let's make this maybe a little bit longer chart. We'll make this a 10-year chart. We can see that biotech put in some highs in 2015 and then again in 2017, kind of a false breakout above those levels here. I'll use the inspector here. We can see biotech actually trading right now against some important levels that we traded against in 2015 and 2019, 2017, 2019. So biotech trading at some levels that have been important in the past. That's just kind of our basic support and resistance analysis. But what's interesting is that with the volume by price tool, we can also see that this is one of the biggest volume price ranges that XBI has traded in over the past 10 years. So we know that this is an important level. When we get above this, we've seen a lot less volume in this price level above here. But biotech, as you can see, really getting into some price levels that we've seen a lot of volume trade at in the past. Really sort of tried these highs multiple times, failed to make that breakout for many, many years, finally did in 2020, and now we've come all the way back down to test those levels. So again, this volume by price tool can really kind of be combined with your traditional support and resistance analysis and can indicate kind of where we might see a lot of volume come into a specific security, either rescue it as support or provide resistance there if a lot of sellers are coming into the market at a specific level. So always an interesting tool, even over multiple time frames. So that takes us through 4 of my personal favorite support and resistance tracking tools. We've done this in SharpCharts, so now what we're going to do is actually jump over to ACP. We're going to take a look at our advanced charting platform. We're going to quickly run through the 4 that we've covered already, show you how you can use some of these same tools over in ACP, but then we are also going to take a look at our 5th and final tool, which is an ACP exclusive. So let's jump over to that new platform now and take a look. All right, my friends, so here we are in ACP. Of course, this is our advanced charting platform. Very interactive, very fluid, very dynamic. Again, as we like to show off on this show, you can sort of scroll through time, zoom in, zoom out. You can even do things like manipulating the y-axis very, very easily. There is tons that you can do with it. And especially with the addition of things like multi-chart layouts and exclusive plugins from a whole collection of expert technicians like Larry Williams, for instance, Mark Chaikin. We've got great tools from a whole bunch of partners that have been bringing their work into ACP. It's continuing to grow in some very, very fascinating directions. Another one, though, that we've brought recently to the platform, we partnered with Brian Shannon of alphatrends.net to bring the anchored VWAP to ACP. So that's going to be our 5th tool that we're going to cover today. We're going to hit that in just a couple of minutes. But before we do, I want to make sure that you're aware of how to use some of those same SharpCharts tools over here in ACP. So we're going to get back. We're here on Apple, and we've got that same kind of stripped out basic candlesticks chart. I'm actually going to set that to be the same duration that we were looking at before as well. This is an 18-month chart, 1.5 years. So first up, the inspector. Now we call this something different in ACP, but it works very, very similarly. It doesn't have quite as many features to it. The SharpCharts inspector is actually a little bit ahead of ACP at the moment. But as you can see, when I hover over this chart, there's nothing to my cursor. I just get the basic cursor, the basic arrow. Now, I have an option, though, to come up here and turn on what we like to call the crosshairs in ACP. When I turn that on, this little circle is going to be highlighted. And now, as you see, when I hover over my ACP chart, I get that same horizontal and vertical line, just like we had with the inspect tool in SharpCharts. So this is something, again, that I actually like to leave on for my ACP charts. I typically have this on. Makes it really nice and easy to identify these support and resistance levels on the fly as you're going through your charts. What this does not have to it is the built-in measuring function. That's something that we're hoping to bring out this year here in ACP. So the SharpCharts tool actually a little bit ahead there. But this is still a fantastic tool. You can just hover over these charts and again start to identify those levels. Has the same label feature. So at the bottom of the chart, you see the date, and over on the right, you see the price level that you're hovering at. We've just made actually one little update to this to make it just the line. So in the center of this chart, it's actually even a little bit cleaner now. You don't have any cursor getting in the way. You can really sort of pinpoint specific price levels. So that is our first stop. The crosshair is something you might want to turn on for ACP. Makes it easy to identify these support levels on the fly. Now, next up, we're going to take a look at some of those annotation tools. So over here on the left side of the platform, we've got our annotations panel. That is the 4th icon down. Looks like the little pencil and ruler icons there. When you open up this panel, again, as I mentioned, you actually have a couple of additional drawing tools here in ACP. So you've got some controls up at the top. You can set your color. For instance, I like to use those purple lines, so we'll put one of those up on the screen. By the way, in the new color picker here, we actually just rolled this out in ACP. You can now customize colors and then hit the little star icon to actually save those into a 3rd row of colors. A new little thing that we just rolled out. So we set our color, we set our line thickness. Let's say we want to do a nice thick line. And here we can select our Trendline tool, just like we did over in the SharpCharts world. Now, those same hotkeys that we looked at in SharpCharts, those apply in ACP as well. So down here at the bottom, just like we looked at the little question mark icon, you've got a little help icon here that you can click, and this actually pops up the Annotations Quick Tips menu. Same idea, you've got those global hotkeys that are applicable, but we also have tool-specific hotkeys. So here in our Trendline tool, again, Command Drag, that's going to snap things to be either horizontal or perfectly vertical, perfectly horizontal or perfectly vertical. So take a look at this quick tips menu. There's some helpful things in there if you are an ACP user. But as we saw, we're going to set our Trendline tool. We're going to come down here and we're going to draw that across. Now, as we looked at before here, this is a just sort of a free line. But as soon as I hold down the Command key, you can see that that automatically gets pinned to be perfectly horizontal. So the same concepts apply. We can set those lines. Maybe we want to drag this one up a little bit. We'll make that a little bit shorter. We'll add that one here to our most recent resistance turn support level in Apple. So first and foremost, you've got your Trendline tool, same one that we looked at in SharpCharts. Now the one little addition is that we actually have three different versions of the Trendline tool here in ACP, 2 additional ones. You have the option to do an extended trend line, which, as you will see here, is basically extended out in one direction. So that'll go infinitely in one direction. If you want to draw, for instance, a trend line or one of these support and resistance levels from a specific start point, this can be really helpful. If you want those lines to kind of continue out into the future, you can use that extended trend line feature, and they'll just kind of keep on going indefinitely. You don't have to keep dragging those across and sort of updating them as you go. Hit delete there. The other one that we have in ACP is also an infinite trend line. So as you can see here, this one goes infinitely in both directions. So if you wanted to use this to be a horizontal support and resistance line, you could do that. This one's going to draw just like our auto support and resistance tool. It's going to be infinitely in each direction. So you do have a couple of different trend line tools there in ACP. We also, though, have our auto support and resistance tool. So just like we looked at in SharpCharts, down here in the line tool section, you've got auto support and resistance. And this one draws the exact same way. You can actually put this on your charts and you'll see those different sort of sections of the line highlighting different colors depending on where price is trading relative to those lines. So we're going to set that. In this case, it's actually going to match the opacity of the color picker. So it won't pull in the colors from the color picker because that auto support and resistance line is always going to be red and green, but it will pull in the opacity. So what I mean by that, if you open up the color picker here in ACP, if we drag this down, we can fade that auto support and resistance line out. If we drag this all the way up, we can see that it's now fully visible, if you will, has no opacity to it. So I personally like to make things a little bit transparent so I can actually sort of see the price bars through them. But if you like that sort of solid color view, you can set that here in ACP by using that little color picker and the opacity slider there to make things either more opaque or less opaque. So that is our auto support and resistance tool here in ACP. Now we're going to wipe out this chart here. I'm actually going to just hit that delete all button. We're going to wipe out this chart. We're back to just our 1.5 years blank candlesticks chart. We're going to highlight our 4th tool that we looked at in SharpCharts, which was our volume by price tool. Now the same concept goes, but there's one little thing that I want to show you here in ACP about the volume by price tool. Over on the left side in our add indicators menu, you can scroll down to find this in the menu, or you can search for it, volume, and you can find that down here in the all indicators menu, volume by price right there. Or in my case, because again, volume by price is something I personally like to use quite often on my charts, you can actually favorite any indicators here in the ACP all indicators menu. If you check something, check that little star icon for any indicator, it'll automatically show up here at the top of the list in your favorites. So in my case, you can see that I've actually favorited volume by price. So it makes it really accessible right up here at the top of the menu. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to add volume by price to our charts. And things look very similar, but they are a little bit different here in ACP. So I want to highlight some of the different ways this works. First off, in ACP, we're going to match SharpCharts just sort of out of the box. This is going to be set to have that colored volume view by default. But if you do want to change that, you have controls here for the up volume and the down volume. If you wanted them to be the same, for instance, maybe you wanted both of them to be blue, you can just change those two, and now we're back to kind of that monochromatic view, just like we were looking at in SharpCharts. I personally like to view it with the green for up volume and the red for down volume, so I'll keep those colors on there. You've got a couple other settings though that you can mess with. So the opacity is one of them. You can make this really, really opaque again, or you can make it really, really visible, make it really stand out on your charts. Depending on which one you want, it's going to be set kind of in the middle by default. The other option that you have here in ACP for that volume by price indicator is actually the position. So you can take these volume by price bars, they're going to be on the left side by default, but if you'd rather view them on the right side of your chart, you can also do that. That's just going to flip them over to the other side of the chart. So a nice little feature there. I've actually been playing around with this more in ACP, and I'm starting to really like them over on the right side. So that's something that we're hoping to bring to SharpCharts pretty soon there. But you have that option in ACP, flipping them from either the left viewing them from the left side of the chart or viewing them from the right. You do also have control over the number of bars. So if you want to get a little bit more granular, you can do that. You can drag this all the way up to 50 bars. Now this is pretty interesting to drag this back and forth. This is where kind of the interactivity of ACP becomes really, really important. We can see when we get a little bit more granular for this level that we were looking at previously in Apple, that's a price level that a lot of volume has traded at in the past. When we get a little bit more granular, again, these things don't get kind of jumbled together as much. Now, by default, it's going to be those bigger bars. It's going to be only 12 bars on the chart. But again, we can start to customize this and really kind of dig into those price levels. We can start at this higher level view and say, okay, between these, in this relatively big range, what was the volume in the past? But we can start to drag that slider up and kind of view things a little bit more specifically at different price levels, narrower price levels. So that can always be a fun one. And here in ACP, again, really easy to do with the interactivity that we've built into the platform. So very cool. So that brings us up to match sharp charts. We've done our 4 features there. We've done our inspect tool, or our crosshairs as we call it in ACP. We've taken a look at some of those trendline tools, looked here in ACP at not just the standard trendline, but also the extended and the infinite options that you have there. We've looked at our auto support and resistance tool in both platforms, and we've compared volume by price in both of those 2 platforms. Our final feature, our 5th one that we're going to take a look at, is the anchored volume weighted average price, anchored VWAP. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Brian Shannon, the work that he does. If you're on Twitter, by the way, Brian does a ton on Twitter, very active there, but a great technician, a great trader, a great strategist, someone that we love working with. We've brought Brian on many times on the channel. He's done a lot of great content for us. I recently had an opportunity to sit down with Brian and interview him when we brought out the anchored VWAP on ACP. I had an opportunity to sit down with Brian, talk about the history of it, talk about the value of this indicator. But then at the end of that video, Brian actually did a full demo on how to use the anchored volume weighted average price in ACP. So we're going to put a link to that video in the description down below. You can also go to YouTube, type in ACP anchored VWAP, Brian Shannon, Grayson, Roze, any of that stuff, and it'll come up. But this is a great tool, and Brian has done a fantastic demo of it with this video that we put out when we first brought this tool out. So on today's show, we're not going to dive into a full analysis of how to use it. We've got our time running down here at the end of our show, but I do want to give you a sense of how this tool looks in ACP, how it kind of works, how you can start to incorporate it into your approach. It's very easy to use in ACP. We've made it very interactive, and it's very cool. So we'll clear out this chart again. I'm actually going to come down, just delete that volume by price indicator off, and now we're back to our 1.5 years, very stripped out, very simple chart. Now again, you can come over here to the add indicator menu. You can search for the anchored VWAP. This one actually is quite high because this is alphabetic. So the anchored VWAP is right there. In my case though, another indicator that I use a lot, so I've actually favorited it. So all you've got to do to add the anchored VWAP to your charts is give it a click. Now, by default, the anchored VWAP is going to go back, I believe it's about 50 periods. So we're just going to kind of pick a random number that's going to display some data just to get that anchored VWAP on the charts. But really, the anchored VWAP is all about customizing things to what's happening on the charts. It's all about getting you involved, not just kind of using an out-of-the-box number. This tool allows you to pick very important price levels, highs and lows, important dates, for instance, the IPO of something, and actually start to view those anchored VWAP lines off of that date that you set. So again, that demo that Brian did is fantastic. I don't want to steal anything from it because he is the master of this tool. So definitely carve out some time and go watch that video. But here in ACP, when you open up the anchored VWAP, when you add it to your charts, we will automatically turn on the crosshairs for you, that vertical line and that horizontal line. And to set the anchored VWAP at a specific point, you do have the option of typing in a specific date and a specific time and how you want it calculated. Or to make it even easier, you can simply hover over your charts and click where you want the anchored VWAP to be set from. So for instance, we've been looking a lot at this this important level here for Apple. This was kind of the swing high that really became resistance and then eventually became support. So let's say we wanted to set an anchored VWAP off of that level. All I've got to do is hover over that bar. Again, the crosshairs are going to be turned on automatically for me. I give that a click, and there we go. You can see that that anchored VWAP line automatically gets set from exactly where I clicked from. Now, what this is going to show, again, I want you to go watch that video that we did with Brian. He goes into to great detail on all of this. But as the name suggests, it is a volume-weighted average price. So it's calculating price, but weighted by the volume that's been trading at those different price levels from wherever you set it. So in this case, from that sort of swing high that we saw back in September of 2020, the average price weighted for volume that's traded in Apple is 134.77. Now, the value of this indicator is that these can basically become kind of hidden support and resistance levels for a specific security, whether it's an index, whether it's a specific stock, an ETF, a cryptocurrency, anything that you're using it on. The anchored VWAP can actually become kind of hidden support and resistance levels. So we saw that really back here. This anchored VWAP set off of that swing high from September of 2020. That really became an important level that Apple was trading against. We chopped around it quite a bit here. We actually chopped around it back in November of 2020, but we chopped around it there in kind of the spring of 2020, and then really tested it again in sort of the summer months of 2020, early summer months there, late spring, early summer, and we tested that. We bounced off it, and that was really the start of this big run to the upside. So what's cool about this is that we can also set more anchored VWAP lines. We can sort of layer them in. That's a strategy that Brian talks about a lot, especially in his video that we did with him. So again, another reason to go watch that. You can start to layer in, though, these anchored VWAP lines, and they become incredibly powerful visualizations. So we can close that out. We can come back, add another anchored VWAP, and again, we can choose where we want this to be anchored from. So for instance, I'm going to anchor this from sort of that last touch point that we had there, the last time that we really tested that first anchored VWAP that we set. Now we've got that one in, and again, we can see that that actually became another kind of important hidden support level for this stock. We really sort of traded around that anchored VWAP, and it became kind of this important hidden support level for the stock. Now, when we combine that with some of our traditional support and resistance analysis, these can be incredible insights for any security that we are watching. Again, we can start to layer in more. So in this case, we'll layer in another one. We'll do that off of this test from there. And we can see that actually we've got kind of the same thing going on right now. That's that other layered in anchored VWAP from sort of that last test of the second VWAP that we did. That ended up becoming important support there for Apple, sort of back as in November, basically, as it kind of got picked up off that level. But now we've actually seen Apple really kind of test against that level, trade around it. We're back above that anchored VWAP level. So this can provide very unique insights for any security that you're watching. The anchored VWAP is a very, very fun tool to play around with, a very powerful tool to play around with. And again, that demo that we did with Brian is just chock full of insights, a lot of views into his process, how Brian actually uses this, and how he applies it to different stocks and funds and indexes that he's analyzing. So definitely something to go watch. Again, we're going to put a link to the description, link in the description down below to that video. So that is our show for today. I know we covered a ton. This was a long episode, always a bit of a long one when we jump between SharpCharts and ACP, but hopefully this has given you a sense of some of these tools that you can use to track and analyze and follow support and resistance levels in those charts that you're watching. I want to thank you again for joining me on today's show. Again, we do this every Friday, Stock Charts in Focus. Really just digging into different corners of the website, helping you get more value out of the different tools and everything. So if you are a StockCharts user and you want to get more value out of the platform, all the different corners of it, there's so much there. We cover it all here every Friday on StockCharts in Focus, 5 p.m. Eastern time, but also up on our YouTube channel after that and the on-demand platform at StockChartsTV.com. Thank you again, though, for watching me. Again, my name is Grayson Roze, Vice President of Operations here at StockCharts. I'll see you again very soon for another episode of the show next week. But until then, chart on, my friends.
Hey guys, Dave Keller here with StockCharts.com. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, and we hope you did, hit the like button right below. Also, we have so much new content every day. Consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit the subscribe button in the video or right below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Have a fantastic day.